Hello and welcome to this episode of the Somatic Baby podcast, where we explore the body, the baby, and the beautiful, sometimes overwhelming, sacred work of bringing a new human into the world. And I'm Patel, and today we're going to talk about something that really matters. This is episode 4 of our Tree Baby series, and I want to say before we begin that if you've been with us since episode 1, thank you. Something has been building across these 4 episodes, a conversation, a remembering, and today we bring it home. Because today we're talking about babies themselves. Not just what we can do to protect them, not just what we stop doing, but what we can give them, what nature can give them, what the living world, the trees, the soil, the birdsong, the breeze is literally doing inside a baby's developing brain when we take them outside. So this episode is equal parts neuroscience, somatic practice, and probably what I can only describe as wonder. So let's take a breath, settle in, and we will begin. So before I say another word, I want to bring you into the moment now. And I want you to bring a moment into your mind where you've witnessed, or perhaps you can imagine witnessing, a baby meeting the natural world for the very first time. So really see that image in your head. Really feel it with tenderness, with reverence. Because there is a moment, if you've ever witnessed it, and you'll never forget it, it's when a baby first touches a tree or grass or water for the very first time. And their arm reaches out and their fingers make contact. And then something extraordinary happens before your eyes. They slow down, their fingers stop and start, they trace, they press. And if they're exploring a tree, it's those ridges and the roughness and the coolness and the grain of something that is ancient and alive. Their eyes go wide, their mouth might fall open slightly. The whole world for this baby has just become this tree. And in that moment, you're watching something that is not only beautiful, but it's neurological. What you're witnessing in the slowing down of those tiny fingers, in the widening of those eyes, is a baby's brain doing something it was designed over millions of years of evolution to do. It is making contact with reality, not a stimulation of reality, not a pixelated approximation of reality, not a two-dimensional image that's rendered on glass as a screen, but reality. Living, breathing, bark, real temperature, true texture, and actual earth. And what happens in the brain during that encounter? I want to walk you through that today because it changes how we understand everything. It changes how we understand screens. It changes how we understand early childhood. It changes what it means to raise a child in the modern world. And it changes what it means to be a tree baby. So there's a truth that neuroscience has been trying to tell us for decades. And I think many of us have heard, but perhaps you haven't felt it in your body, that the human brain is more malleable in the first 1001 days of life than at any other point in existence. From conception, through pregnancy, through birth, through those first weeks of life when a baby can't even hold their own head up, all the way through early childhood, the brain is engaged in building a project of almost incomprehensible scale. Hundreds and billions of neurons, trillions of synaptic connections, neural circuits that will govern how this person moves through the world, how they will regulate their emotions, how they will relate to others, how they'll learn, how they'll cope, and how they'll love. All of it being wired right now in response to experience. Now, Dr. Jack Shonkoff of the Harvard Center of the Developing Child, which is an incredible resource, I really recommend it, uses this phrase, brain architecture. And I love that phrase because it makes it tangible. architecture. You can feel that word. There are foundations, there are load-bearing walls, there are structures that once set shape everything that gets built on top of them. And here's what Dr. Schoenkoff says about those early structures. And this is a direct quote that I've written so that I can really see it, and it never stops landing in my body. You can modify behaviour later, but you cannot rewire disruptive brain circuits. So let's just sit with that with a moment. You can't rewire disrupted brain circuits. So he's not saying that growth stops. He's not saying that healing is impossible. The brain has a remarkable plasticity throughout life. But what he's saying is this, that the circuits laid down in the first years of life are foundational in the way that later circuits are not. So getting it right the first time, creating the conditions for healthy circuit formation, matters in a way that nothing else quite does. So the question in this podcast today is the question at the heart of the entire Treat Babies movement, and that's this. What are the conditions that build healthy brain circuits in early childhood, and are we providing them? So just feel into that question, not with anxiety, but with curiosity. What do you believe a baby needs in those first years? What has the world told you that they need? And what does something deepen in you now you already know? So neuroscience has identified 3 primary conditions that build healthy neural architecture in early childhood. And when I share these with you, I want you to notice somatically in your body which environment naturally provides all 3. So the first condition is responsive caregiving, serve and return, or the love loop that we call it at Blossom and Berry. Baby makes a sound, parent responds, baby reaches out, parent mirrors. Baby expresses a need and the caregiver meets it. It's this back and forth, this call and response. It's the most single powerful builder of circuits that neuroscience has identified. And so every moment of attunement between a parent and baby is a neural event, literally. A connection is made, a circuit is strengthened, a synapse fires and says, the world is responsive, I am seen, I am safe, and it's worth trying to connect. The second condition is sensory richness. The baby's brain builds itself through sensory experience. Touch, sound, smell, temperature, taste, texture, movement. The more varied, the more real, the more multi-dimensional the sensory environment, the richer the neural landscape that gets built from it. So babies are not passive receivers of sensory information, they are active explorers of it. Their entire body is an instrument of learning. Every surface they touch, every sound they track, every smell they process, every shift in their temperature they feel. It's all data and it's all architecture. The third condition is a low stress environment, and this is where it gets serious. Chronic stress, what researchers call toxic stress, is perhaps the single greatest threat to her early brain development that we know of. When a baby lives in a chronically high cortisol environment where their nervous system is regularly in a state of activation, threat or dysregulation, the brain does not build optimally. The circuits that govern learning, attention, language, problem solving, emotional regulation, they are all compromised by chronic stress. A baby cannot manage stress alone. Their nervous system is entirely dependent on co-regulation from a calm, present caregiver. The baby's brain is literally borrowing regulation from the parent's nervous system until it is mature enough to regulate itself, which takes years. So now I want you to hold those 3 conditions: responsive caregiving, sensory richness, low stress environment. So which environment do you think provides all of those 3 simultaneously? Which environment removes the thing most likely to disrupt responsive caregiving, the phone, while surrounding a baby with the richest possible sensory world, while simultaneously dropping the parent's cortisol by 50%, shifting both the parent and baby into a state of parasympathetic safety. Now, if you've been listening to the previous episodes, I think you know the answer. And this is what this episode is all about. So I want to do something with you right now. I want to compare two environments, not through statistics, but through the body. Because I think we've been trying to have the screen time debate in the wrong language. We talk about it in terms of time limits and age guidelines and research studies, and those do matter. We'll get to the research in a moment. But first, let's just feel this. So close your eyes if it's safe to do so. Imagine handing a baby a tablet or a phone. The screen glows, there's a bright animated image on it. There's a tinny sound. And the surface is flat, smooth, the glass cool, unyielding. The light is flickering. The colours are saturated. The sound is compressed through a small speaker. Now notice what you feel in your own body as you hold that image. Now let's try the other. Imagine taking the same baby and sitting with them under a tree. The light through the leaves is moving, dappling, shifting, alive. There is wind, soft, unpredictable, touching their skin. There are sounds, a bird somewhere above, the rustle of leaves, maybe water nearby, maybe another child's laugh in the distance. And the ground beneath them is uneven, alive. It bends, and the soil gives way. There's pebbles that surprise. There's a smell of the earth. There is the warmth of the sun and the cool of the shade. And there is you, present, unoccupied, available. Your eyes finding their eyes, your breath, your arms holding. So notice what you feel in your own body as you hold this image. Now, what was the difference? Not from your head, but from your body. Most people, when I guide them through this, describe the first image, the screen, as something that makes them feel slightly tense, contracted, overstimulated in a bit of a flat way, a kind of two-dimensional buzz. The second, nature, most people feel something open, something in the chest, something in the belly, a little bit of unclenching. That's not sentiment, that's biology. The screen delivers two sensory channels, visual or auditory. These are both two-dimensional, both highly controlled, both optimised for engagement, which means optimised to trigger the nervous system's alert response to keep the brain in a state of mild activation so it keeps watching. Nature delivers every sensory channel simultaneously: tactile, smell, proprioceptive, vestibular, thermal, visual, auditory, but complex, uncontrolled, alive and ever-changing. And crucially, nature does not optimise for engagement. It doesn't compete for intention. It simply is. And in that isness, the nervous system, even a baby's nervous system, finds permission to settle. A screen can show a baby a picture of a tree, but nature provides them with one. And in that difference, in that gap, the image and the living thing is everything we're talking about in this series. The baby who reaches for the butterfly, watches it land, lift and disappear, who learns that beauty is fleeting, unpredictable and real. That baby is building neural circuits that no screen can build. Circuits of intention, circuits of wonder, circuits that embody the understanding that the world is alive and I am alive with it. So now I want to talk about the research, and I want to give weight I want to talk about the weight it really deserves, not as a list of statistics, but actually as a story of 7,097 children, because that's what this is. It's a study published in JAMA Pediatrics, one of the most respected medical journals in the world, that followed 7,097 children from age 1 through to age 4. And researchers measured how much screen time these children had at age 1, and then they tracked their development. Communication, fine motor skills, problem solving, personal and social development. They were looking for what's called a dose-response relationship, meaning as screen time goes down, so does harm. Does harm go up proportionately, or is it more of an all or nothing? Sorry, I got that wrong. When screen time goes up, does harm go up proportionately, or is it a bit more of an all or nothing effect? So what they found was a dose-response relationship that was clear, consistent across categories. So children who had 4 or more hours of screen time per day at age 1 were 4.78 times more likely to have a communication delay at age 2. Nearly 5 times the risk for language, for the ability to make sounds, to communicate, to understand words, to connect meaningfully with another human being. The same children were 2.67 times more likely to have a problem-solving delay. Now, these weren't delays that disappeared by school age. The researchers tracked them up to age 4. Communication delays, problem-solving delays, still there, still measurable, still impacting the children's lives. Now, I need you to hear this without falling into shame and panic. Most of the parents in this study were not being negligent. They were doing what the world tells us is to do, and it's fine. They were using screens as tools, as entertainment, as the path of least resistance in an exhausting season of life. They were human beings doing their best in a world that gave them very little support and then handed them a glowing rectangle as the solution. So this is not a failure of individual parents, it's a failure of the information environment. And that's exactly what we talk about here. Because when you genuinely understand what is at stake in the early years, you make different choices. Not perfect choices, different ones, informed ones. The World Health Organization is unambiguous about this. Children under 2, 0 screen time. Not reduced screen time, not limited screen time, 0. The American Academy of Pediatrics says the same. Keep children away from screens until 18 months. For children 2 to 5, a maximum of 1 hour a day of high quality content, always with a caregiver present. These aren't arbitrary rules. This is a distillation of decades of research into the developing brain. They are trying to say, in the language of medical guidelines, what neuroscience is screaming. That the first 2 years are for the real world, for real faces, real touch, real sound, real sensation, not stimulations of those things, the real things. Now, I want to take this back even further because there's something I find really extraordinary, which is a piece of research published in the journal Nature in 2025, and I think it belongs in every conversation about early childhood and the natural world. Researchers studied the relationship between a pregnant mother's exposure to green space and her baby's brain development. Specifically, they were looking at whether a mother's anxiety during pregnancy affected her baby's neurological outcomes, because we know through the science of prenatal stress that a highly anxious pregnant mother transmits that stress biologically to her developing baby through cortisol and through the hormonal environment of the womb. Now, the 2025 study found that prenatal exposure to green space, living near parks, trees, nature during pregnancy buffered the effect of maternal anxiety on a baby's brain. So read that again. A mother who was anxious during pregnancy, who had meaningful access to green space, who walked in parks, who spent time amongst the trees, who lived within a few hundred meters of natural green areas, her baby showed significantly less impact from maternal anxiety on their neurological development. Nature was protective, not as a metaphor, not as a feeling, but as a biological reality. A mother's nervous system, regulated by regular contact with the natural world, created a calmer womb with less cortisol and a container in which the baby's brain could develop closer to its full potential, even in the presence of the very real stresses of modern pregnancy. So if you're pregnant right now, or you know someone who is, let this land gently, not as pressure, as an invitation. The trees are already doing something for babies. They've been doing this since conception. And this is what the Tree Babies movement understands at its roots. The relationship between baby and the natural world does not begin at birth. It actually begins in the womb, in the nervous system of the mother, in the hormonal environment that she inhabits, and to the degree in which she's held by the earth itself during the monumental biological project of growing a new human being. Nature is not a postnatal add-on, it's a prenatal necessity. So I want to introduce a word now that I think is one of the most important words in early childhood development, and one that is least used, and that is interoception. It means simply the ability to feel what is happening inside of your own body. Your heartbeat, your breath, your feeling of hunger or fullness, warmth or cold, comfort or discomfort, tension or ease, the felt scent of emotion, the tightening of the throat when you're sad, the flutter in your chest when you're excited, the heaviness in your belly when something feels wrong. Now, interoception is the foundation of emotional intelligence, and it's the bedrock of self-regulation. You cannot manage a feeling that you cannot feel. You can't regulate an internal state that you have no access to. And this is the extraordinary thing, that interoception is developed through the sensory experience of the real world in early childhood. Not through educational content, not through screens, through touch, through temperature, through texture, sound, smell, and movement. Through the body being in genuine contact with the living world and having a regulated, attuned adult presence to help name and reflect what the body is experiencing. For example, you touched something cold, didn't you? Feel that. That's cold. Your skin is telling you something. The wind surprised you. Did you feel that right there on your face? You're reaching for that leaf. Your hands want to know what it feels like. Let's find out together. These are not merely sweet moments. They are building a language, the body's language, the felt sense years from now that will allow this child to say, I'm feeling anxious right now, and mean it from the inside out, but not from a definition in a book. Nature is the richest interoception classroom that exists. And the variation in temperature between the sun and the shade, the unexpected poke of a twig, the softness of a moss that surprises your fingers, the smell of the rain on dry earth, that bypasses the thinking brain entirely and lands in the limbic system, the emotional centre of the brain, as ancient recognition. The sound of the wind that builds and retreats, the feeling of wet grass on bare feet. And none of this can be replicated on the screen. None of it. And all of it is building in babies' developing nervous system the capacity to be present in their own body, to feel themselves, to know themselves from the inside out. So a tree baby at the deepest level is a child who's learning to trust their body's knowing, because from the beginning of their life, their body was given real things to respond to. So what is a tree baby? I've been using this phrase throughout the series. I want to take a moment to really define it, not as a brand or a course or a campaign, but a vision. So what is a tree baby? Well, a tree baby is a child whose earliest sensory memories are woven through living in connection to the living world, whose first textures include bark and grass and soil, whose first sounds include bird song, wind and rain, whose first experiences of temperature were the sun on their skin and the cool of the shade, whose first encounters with impermanence were leaves falling, puddles drying, and flowers closing at dusk. A tree baby is a child whose nervous system was allowed to develop in the presence of living systems that are inherently regulated, inherently rhythmical, inherently safe in the way that only something that has existed for millions of years can be. A tree baby is a child whose parents went outside even when they were exhausted, even when it was inconvenient, even when the park was just a strip of grass between two streets, because they understood in their body, if not always in their mind, that the earth was trying to support them, that nature is not a luxury for a child's development, it is a requirement. A tree baby grows up with something that's becoming very rare, an intimate relationship with the living world, a felt sense of belonging to something larger than them, a nervous system that knows how to settle because it learned to settle in the arms of a regulated parent, in the presence of a regulated earth. And here is the larger vision. Here is what I really believe that tree babies is all about. We're at a moment in human history when disconnection from the natural world has reached a kind of crisis. Children are growing up indoors, primarily with screens as their interface with reality, cortisol as their baseline state, with a nervous system shaped by notifications, algorithms, and the relentless stimulation of an attention economy that does not care what it does to a 3-month-old's developing brain. And the consequences we're beginning to see include developmental delay. In childhood, there's anxiety rates growing up, and in a growing crisis of what researchers call a nature deficit disorder. In a generation of young people who have exquisite emotional language, but no felt sense of what their emotions actually feel like in their bodies. The Tree Babies movement is a response to this, a gentle-rooted, science-backed, soul-alive response. It says we can do this differently, not perfectly, not with guilt or self-punishment, but with knowledge, with intention, within 15 minutes of the day, a patch of sky, and the willingness to put your phone in your pocket and let the earth hold you. It says every generation has a responsibility, and ours is this, to raise children who know that they belong to the living world, children who feel it in their body, children who, when the world becomes overwhelming, as it will do, can find their way back to regulation through the simplest, most ancient practice in human history. Go outside, put your feet on the earth, and feel your breath slow. So feel into this. Not with your head, but in your body. What would it mean to raise a child who fundamentally felt that they belonged to the earth? What would it mean if a child grew up knowing in their bones, not just in their belief, that the natural world was home? So I want to be deeply practical for a moment, because we've talked a lot in this episode, and what I'm telling you might feel enormous. Brain architecture, neural circuits, prenatal cortisol, interception, the new earth generation. But when you look at the reality, maybe you live in a flat with no garden. Maybe it's winter and the park feels miles away. Maybe you have a screaming newborn and the idea of taking them outside feels impossible before you've even had a coffee. So let me bring it all the way down to the smallest possible unit, because research supports the smallest possible unit. 10 minutes of nature improves focus and mood measurably. Even brief exposure, a few minutes of real sky, real grass, real air, shifts brain function in a way that can be measured on an EEG. You don't need a forest, you need a tree. One tree. And if there's a tree within walking distance of where you live, you have access to everything that we've talked about today. You don't need a program, you need presence. Put your baby on the grass, sit next to them, put your phone in your pocket, look at what they are looking at, follow their gaze, and when their fingers reach for something, let them reach. When a bird flies over and their eyes track it with them. When the wind comes, say, feel that, that's the wind. And that's it. That's a tree baby's moment. And when those moments accumulate, when they become the texture of a child's earliest life, the neural circuitry they build are extraordinary. Circuits of intention, sharpened by tracking a real butterfly. Circuits of wonder, fired by the endless novelty of the living world. Circuits of safety, built in the nervous system of a child whose earliest memories are outside, present parent, a live world, held. Practically, here is what I ask of every parent who hears this. Start with 15 minutes every day. Phone in pocket, babe in arms, or on the ground, outside. That's it. That's the Tree Baby's prescription. That's screen to green for 15. Sounds small, but developmentally it's enormous. Now notice what that does to your body. Notice how your breath changes in the first few minutes when you go outside. Notice your shoulders drop. Notice when your mind stops racing and starts observing. Notice when you stop thinking about your to-do list and start noticing the way that the light hits the leaves. That shift, that moment, is your nervous system coming home, and your baby, who is neurologically fused to your nervous system, is coming home too, together. So before I close this series, I want to speak directly to some of you, because I know for some of you who have been listening, this hasn't just been information, it's been a calling. Something in you has been waking up over these last 4 episodes. Maybe you're a parent who's been sitting outside with your baby thinking, other families need this. Maybe you're a midwife or a health visitor or a yoga teacher or a somatic practitioner or a birth doula. And you've been thinking, this is the missing piece. This is what I want to offer the families I work with. Maybe you're someone who has always felt the pull of both the body and the natural world, and you've been searching for a way to bring those things together in meaningful service. So if any of that is resonating, and if your body is doing something, as I say this, a kind of leaning forward or a quickening, I'd love to tell you about the Tree Babies training, because the world needs more people who know how to do this work, who can hold space in nature with parents and babies and guide families back to the most fundamental relationship there is, the relationship between the human body and the living earth. And the Tree Babies training is for people who want to carry this work forward, who want to be part of building a new earth, one family, one forest, one 15-minute miracle at a time. So if this is calling from you, I love for you to reach out and connect. And I would love to invite you into the Tree Babies space, because the new earth needs its teachers. And I think one of them could be you. So we've come to the end of this Tree Babies series, 4 episodes, 4 pillars, 4 different doorways into the same truth, that nature is our mother. Your nervous system knows it, your baby's developing brain depends on it, the research confirms it, and something ancient in you, something that was always there, waiting, already believed it. So maybe you came into this series wondering what a tree baby was, and now you know. It's your baby, held in nature, with you, present, phone in pocket, cortisol dropping, circuits building, wonder waking up in both of you. And it begins with 15 minutes. And it begins today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with your whole body. If something landed for you today, if something stirred, something real, then share it with a parent who needs it, or tag them, send them this episode, because this knowledge belongs to us all. It doesn't belong behind a paywall or inside an algorithm or a course. It belongs in the open air where it was always meant to live. So I will see you next time out in the trees.